Welcome to the Kapital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Monday, April 19th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you all enjoyed the weekend. Title of today's podcast, No Justice, No Peace. That is going to be one of the rallying cries that we will continue the next few days, over the next few days, maybe the next week, whatever it's going to take, as the trial of Derek Chauvin is coming to a conclusion. So both sides, the prosecution and the defense, have rested their cases. Today was closing arguments from both sides, and the case was turned over to the jury for deliberations, which only a few short hours ago concluded day number 1 of deliberations. Now the jury is sequestered. Some argue that that should have been the case from the get-go with respect to these jurors, but the judge ruled against that, but did put them into sequester now for the duration of their deliberations, which who knows when they'll come back with their verdict. It could be tomorrow. It could be a week from now. But the state of Minnesota is in a... You have National Guard on the scene. You have Waters, Impeach 45 on the ground. And what any reasonable person would conclude from this woman's statement and comments is she's inciting a riot, calling for violence. But of course, nothing's going to happen to her, right? Nobody's going to remove her from office. It's amazing, the hypocrisy and the double standard, as long as it fits the narrative of the media, the mainstream media, whatever's trending on social media. And of course, that is that former officer Derek Chauvin was guilty just because of the video that most of us witnessed last May, almost a year ago already, as crazy as that sounds. So this woman, Maxine Waters, is a disgrace to this country, a disgrace to Congress, like so many others of them, Democrats and Republicans alike. But she should be removed. She should be removed from Congress. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. With what she stated before, a couple years ago, about getting in people's faces before. Now, it's not okay for Donald Trump to make statements like that, and it isn't. And I call the president out on that when he made such statements. And it's not okay for her to do it either. But she wants a guilty charge. And that's what she's calling for. He needs to be found guilty. Not of manslaughter. Manslaughter is not slaughter charge. Manslaughter ain't going to do it. It's got to be one of the bigger charges. Otherwise, she's calling on people to get more confrontational. Now, you can interpret that. You can interpret that for what it is, for what you think that means. But we already have people firing on our National Guardsmen. And a verdict hasn't even come down yet. Now, is she going to be held responsible for that? Because they wanted to string up Donald Trump for what happened on January 6th. And I was not happy at all with what the president did in the lead up to January 6th, or on that day, January 6th, when we had those protests turn a little bit violent and breach the Capitol building. This woman is a complete embarrassment and disgrace, just like so many others. Can't keep her mouth shut. Even the judge called her out today because the defense, at least putting it on the record, calling for a mistrial because of these types of comments and statements. in case the jury should hear them. Now, the jury's not supposed to pay attention to the media, but who knows? So we have to trust that they have not paid attention. They are not watching the media. They haven't over the course of the trial. That was their order by the judge, to not listen to any of the media, not to discuss the case. And let's hope that they did follow the rules and the order of the judge. And of course, now being sequestered, I'm sure that's under better control of the court system. And I hope that these jurors take their job seriously, and I believe that they will. They understand the importance of this trial, any trial for that matter. I just hope, as I stated last week, I just hope that the jurors make a sound decision based off of the evidence, based off the facts of the case, based off of using their common sense. Sticking with the totality of the evidence and within the framework of the orders that the judge gave them before they went to deliberate. I want justice to be served. If Derek Chauvin is found guilty, I want that to be because of the totality of the evidence. Not because these jurors are afraid of mob rule. Not because they're afraid of what might happen to their city. Burning buildings, looting, small businesses, big businesses, it doesn't matter. These people don't care. We cannot fall to mob rule. That's not how this country became. It just isn't. Those are not the foundational building blocks. Mob rule did not build this country, but it can definitely tear it down if we allow it to. We have a constitution. We have due process. Thank God we have due process in a court system still. In a constitution, you are innocent until proven guilty. And in a criminal case, the standard that the state has to prove, it has to be above and beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I can't sit here and act as some type of de facto juror because I did not hear every single minute of testimony and every minute and argument that was made by the state and the defense. But as somebody who has listened to a good deal of this case over the past couple of weeks, I can say it was interesting to learn a lot more about the case, as opposed to just what the media has been showing us over the past year, which is typically the case. The media wanted to lock this guy up. They wanted to find him guilty and flip the Constitution on its head. He's guilty and he has to prove his innocence, which is, again, not how it works in this country. So the question comes, did the state prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? They very well may have. They very well may have. Whether it's on all three of those charges or one of those charges, we'll see what the jury comes back with. But I just want justice to be served. And given the totality of the evidence, and given what I have heard, I, again, am not, if he is found guilty of one of the three charges, I think if it is, it'll probably be the lesser of the charges, manslaughter. That's just my feeling on it. Could be a hung jury. And there is the possibility of a straight-up acquittal. Now, if there is an acquittal, break loose. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That city, which has suffered, Minneapolis, just like so many other cities across this country, across the globe, because of the lockdowns and restrictions, and what took place last summer, maybe on the verge of some, at least mini type of recovery, economically speaking. If all hell breaks loose, it's just going to go right back into the gutter. And this is a relatively major city. It's a well-known city in the States. And it's going to potentially be destroyed because people don't like how the justice system quote unquote work for them or didn't work for them. It would be interesting to see how deep a conversation you could have with some of these people who are there to riot or are ready to riot, because it's not going to be a protest. It's going to be a straight up riot. This is not just going to be holding hands and walking down the street saying no justice, no peace, which I would have no problem with as long as it's peaceful. That's what this country is about. Peaceful protest, right to assemble, freedom of speech. But just to go out and to riot and to destroy property, destroy businesses of all sizes, especially small businesses who are just getting the brunt end of all of this. What good is that serving? What purpose is that for? What point are you trying to make? Is that going to just, is that going to cause bad cops to no longer exist? Because you burned a building down? Because you looted a small business? Is that going to bring George Floyd back to his daughter and to his family? No. And yet we have a lawmaker, Maxine Waters, there basically calling for it. That's what that means. Now, the other idiot, Nancy Pelosi, tried covering for her and saying, oh, well, she just meant confrontational and standing up for civil rights. That's a bunch of BS. That's a bunch of BS. But that's what these people get away with. It's okay for the left, it's okay for the Democrats to say these types of things and to do this stuff, but not for the right. Republicans can't do it, conservatives can't do it, can't even think about doing it. This is all divide and conquer at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. It's what it is. It's what it is. The other young man that was killed, was it last Sunday already? Young 20-year-old who was shot and killed. Remember, the police officer thought she was using her taser and ended up shooting and killing the young man and what that caused. So that, of course, is a very recent and open wound in that community. And then we have, again, the Derek Chauvin trial coming to a conclusion. Now, other major cities across the country are bracing for impact as well. And doesn't that send a message as to the state of affairs in the United States of America? We have major cities coast to coast getting prepared for riots. Not for protests, for riots. That's the game plan. Let's hope that doesn't happen. And of course, it's always good to be prepared for the worst. And we can hope that these are peaceful protests. But they weren't peaceful last year, and I see no reason why they're going to be peaceful this year. Even if Derek Chauvin is convicted and found guilty of second-degree murder or third-degree murder. As I stated last week, to me, it doesn't matter. All of these people all over the place, ready to go. Something will happen. I hope I'm wrong about that. No justice, no peace is that statement in and of itself. I understand where it comes from. We talk about the two-tier justice system here all the time, more so with respect to the financial industry and what they get away with, the white-collar crime. Nonetheless, this definitely cuts across socioeconomic spectrum. And we can have a legitimate discussion and debate about our two-tier justice system, which undoubtedly exists. That needs to be reformed. That needs to be dealt with. That should be used as common ground to bring people together, not to divide and conquer, which is how it's being used, because that's the name of the game. It's all about divide and conquer. It's all about distraction. And on the other side of it, it's all about consolidation and stealing wealth. That's why I focus so heavily on the Federal Reserve, on the financial markets, on the economic system. Because that's the big money. That's the big power. This stuff, getting people in the streets, it's bad. And I don't want people in the streets rioting and doing harm to each other or to small businesses or vandalizing homes and other property. I don't want it. And I will talk about it because that is part of the zeitgeist. That is part of our times. That is part of what is going on in this country and in so many other countries around the world, which I had said was going to take place and will continue, and it will pick up pace as the economic decline continues. Stock markets going up is not indicative of economies turning up. It's just not. Huge disconnect. We've been over it. And we'll continue to go over it because that's what this podcast is about. Want a serious discussion on the two-tier justice system? Let's have it. Let's have it. This should be a no-brainer. This should be something that brings together everybody across this country. This is something that liberals and conservatives should be able to sit down and openly discuss. How could any of them ignore it? How could they ignore it? With all of the evidence that we see day in and day out. And I'm not talking about this type of police brutality or the perception of police brutality, because when you actually look at the data, it's really not that bad. And when you take into consideration how big this country is, coast to coast, and how many interactions police officers have with people of all colors, of all backgrounds on a daily basis, and we only come across a few that make headline news. I think that's a little bit more of a testament to the nation's police officers as opposed to the argument that there is systemic racism, institutional racism. That this is all about white police officers targeting black people, particularly black men. It just doesn't read out in the data. It just doesn't. But again, we live in an era where it's not about the facts. It's not about the data. It's about how you feel. It's about your perception of reality. And that's it. It's about your experience. It's not about the truth. It's not about the totality of the evidence. It's just about those 9 minutes and 20 some odd seconds. That's it. That's not how it works. And that's why people cannot have conversations in this country anymore, because you're already coming at it from another side. That's it. If you're talking about the totality of the evidence, you're a racist. What don't you get? What else do you need to see? Didn't you see the 9 minutes and 29 seconds of tape? What more do you need to see? You don't have to hear from the medical examiner. You don't have to hear from a pulmonologist. You don't have to hear from a cardiologist. You don't have to hear from anybody else. You saw the tape. That's it. You know there's a two-tier justice system. You know there's systemic racism. He's guilty. Lock him up. Throw away the key. That's not how it works. So it would be interesting to know how people on that side who feel that way, if you could even have a rational conversation with them. Because if you can't, then what does that? Don't we have to start somewhere? If we can't agree on the basic facts, how are we going to have any type of fruitful conversation that gets us to where we need to be and where we want to be? It just makes it that much more difficult. And it makes it easier for the race hustlers, the Al Sharptons of the world, and many others, to come out and play the game, to play the race card, to play the victim on everything, to get people wound up. Don't talk about black on black crime. Just talk about white police officers killing black people. Don't talk about what takes place on a weekly basis in Chicago. That's evidently not a problem, but all these other things are. Don't talk about the white police officers that kill white people. Don't talk about that. That's irrelevant too. Don't you see what's going on here? Don't you understand the narrative? I'm trying to raise the conversation a little bit. I'm trying to solve the problem. Allowing your emotions to run hot is not going to solve the problem. And a lot of people turning into, MSNBC or CNN, where everything, my God, is about race, is going to turn a lot of people off. Because most people aren't racist. Most white people aren't racist. And when they turn on these stations and they're just trying to get the facts of the day, the news of the day, and it's all about race, 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 and how you're supposed to be feeling guilty because you're white, people are just getting sick and tired of it. And anybody can be a racist. There are white racists, there are black racists, there are Asian racists, there are Hispanic racists. Anybody can be a racist. It's not a one-way street, which is always ignored as well, because that's an inconvenient truth. And I don't like the fact that we even have conversations based off of race. It should be based off of people's actions, content of their character. Isn't that what we were told? Yeah, it was, but people don't want to pay attention to that. Getting back to the case, again, it's going to be a tough call for the jury, I do think. It's definitely not a open-shut case as the media would have you believe. Again, with the totality of the evidence. It is a shame, it's a tragedy that Mr. Floyd died, especially in this manner. But you can't, at least I can't, turn my head away and say, well, he had nothing to do with it. If the man had just been handcuffed, went in the back of the police car, none of this would have happened. None of this would have happened. Just comply. The young man who was shot last weekend, if he wasn't resisting arrest, he'd most likely still be alive. I just don't get it. I understand you don't want to be arrested. I understand that George Floyd had drugs in his system. Again, based off of the totality of the evidence. Resisting arrest. And one thing led to another. That doesn't justify the fact that he's dead. That doesn't mean that police officers can do whatever the hell they want with somebody just because they're resisting arrest. But again, that takes you to the totality of the evidence. The argument made on behalf of the defense. That's something that the jury is going to have to consider. They're going to have to give that weight. They're going to have to give the other evidence that the state presented in their argument. They're going to have to give that weight. And they're going to have to decide. They're going to have to render a verdict. And I just want justice to be served. Whether Derek Chauvin is found guilty or is acquitted, it's what it is. But major cities from coast to coast need to be prepared. Because if it's a hung jury, if it's an acquittal, or if it's the manslaughter charge, all hell is going to break loose. Even if it's a guilty charge of second-degree murder or third-degree murder, I think there's going to be some problems too. So get used to it. Because this ain't going to get any better anytime soon. Because even if he is found guilty, and even if there are no riots, which we hope is the case, that there are no riots, it's not going to be enough. That'll be the next thing, because it's never enough. And that's fine to say that. It's always a work in progress. It's always trying to find a better way to do something. So I don't have a problem with that per se. But I do have concerns with the people who will be making the argument, who will be on the media, who will push this narrative that you got your quote-unquote victory, perhaps, with a conviction of Derek Chauvin, but now it's going to be on to the next thing. And that could be very dangerous. We don't know yet. But I'm just putting that out there. Same thing like I put out with the following COVID-19. Of course, we're still in the midst of it. But what did I say several months ago when New Zealand says, oh, we're good, and then you have the Prime Minister of New Zealand calling out a climate emergency or a climate crisis, whatever the hell she wants to call it. That's the next crisis. That's the next thing. It's always something else is the point I'm trying to make. So whatever happens with the Derek Chauvin case, it's going to move on to something else within the justice system with going after police. I mean, do they want to defund police? Is that what they're going to do again? Are they going to bring that argument up? Because it didn't work out well last year. Didn't work out well at all. But will they bring that up again? Because wouldn't you have to? If you honestly believe that there is systemic and institutional racism, wouldn't you by default then have to call for the defunding of police? Because systemic, to me, I look at that from the economic standpoint, but just a definitional standpoint, too. That means it's everywhere. It's pervasive. You have a systemic event that occurs in the economy, it's everywhere. Like the subprime crisis. Oh, no, it's only going to be contained to real estate. No, it wasn't. It was a systemic event. It went everywhere. That's systemic. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. It touches everything. Why are you going to clean that up? If you honestly believe that's the case, how are you going to clean that up? What are you going to do? Where's the discussion on that? Can you have an open debate about that? Because a lot of people don't believe that there is systemic and institutional racism. I don't believe that there's systemic and institutional racism. Are there racists? Of course. Of course. But there's too much evidence to the contrary. Sorry. Doesn't work with me. You want to make the emotional argument? Yeah, you can do it, but that's not going to hold much water with me. It's a sad display. The whole thing is, it's tragic that this man is dead over $20, and, we can print $20 trillion, and that's not a crime. As I stated last year in that podcast, $20 a crime, 20 trillion ain't. And there's really no winner in this at all. I feel bad for the city of Minneapolis. I feel bad for a lot of small businesses that got wrecked and ruined last summer, and they're likely going to get wrecked and ruined again here this spring, this summer. I hope that's not the case, but it very well may be. Other businesses, coast to coast, especially in our major cities, we continue to have, riots and protests taking place over in Portland, Oregon. They continue to burn stuff down. Nothing wrong with them, of course. They can do it because they're on the left. Liberals can get away with it. Conservatives can't jaywalk, or it's a federal offense. Unbelievable. Some other news, COVID-19 related. So Japan, because of rising cases, the Japanese, the Olympics, are once again in question. That's only a couple short months away from beginning, if it should take place. And there were already restrictions to begin with, pretty much banning a foreign audience from traveling to Japan. So who knows? That's up in the air. We have further in Canada. Recall last week or a couple of weeks ago, a couple of our friends up north gave us some inside information as to what was taking place up there in Canada, in the province of Ontario. Now there's further provinces expanding their lockdowns and restrictions. Can't travel. You are in your quote-unquote health region. You cannot move. You cannot travel outside of your health region unless you have permission or without proper cause. If you do, you will be caught because there are going to be checkpoints. Checkpoints, ladies and gentlemen, checkpoints. It's like Nazi Germany. This is no exaggeration. This is what this is turning into. This is what this is. This is all about control. Many of you may have seen Dr. Fauci testify before the House panel. And again, we'll get to it, Maxine Waters again. But this was a question and answer session between Dr. Fauci and Representative Jim Jordan out of the state of Ohio. Congressman Jordan was asking some basic questions. When can we reopen? What data point do we need to see where we can say, okay, all's clear, everything can open up, people can have their rights back? When can people have their liberties back? Now, I would have liked a great question from the congressman. Definitely needs to be asked. These people need to be held to account. Dr. Fauci and other health experts. Again, the Milgram experiment, they're the guys in the white jackets. Question them. What's going on here? Oh, no, don't worry about it. Just crank the dial. Crank the dial, crank the dial, push the button. Don't worry about it. We know what we're talking about. If it's all about the science, if it's all about the data, well, then why can't you give me a number based off of the science that tells us when we can open up again? When can people have their rights back? When can people have their liberties back? Reasonable question. I'm asking you for a data point based on science. Isn't that what we have been preached about for the past year? All about the science, all about the data. Well, then why can't you give me a number yet? Why can't you do it? Because they don't want to be held to it, because they always want to say, well, no, keep going. It's part of the experiment. Keep going. Crank the dial, push the button. Always a little more. It's never enough. Got to get 50% of the population vaccinated. Now it's 60%. Now it's 75%. Then it'll be 90%. And that won't be enough either, because then they'll blame the 10% or the 5% who don't have vaccines. They say it's those damn people. If they would just get vaccinated and get in line, then everybody can open up again. It's ludicrous. They just keep pushing it back. And because Dr. Fauci refused to give an answer, you have the loudmouth idiot Maxine Waters, who happens to also be on this panel in the House, and tells the congressman to shut his mouth. Could you imagine what would happen to Jim Jordan if he had told Maxine Waters to shut her mouth? He'd be called a racist. He'd be called a bigot. Nancy Pelosi and company would probably be calling for his removal from Congress. But nope, this idiot, she can stand up. She can call for confrontation up in the state of Minneapolis and basically across the country. No problem. She can tell another congressman to shut his mouth. No problem. Again, ladies and gentlemen, just further evidence of this country in a downward spiral with no end in sight whatsoever. None whatsoever. Some other geopolitical news. We have Russia allegedly sending about 100 to 150,000 Russian troops to the Ukrainian border. 100 to 150,000. Various reports out there that I've come across. Troops on the Ukrainian border. Now, we don't know what Vladimir Putin is going to ultimately do. We don't know if he's just trying to get other countries to the table so that he can negotiate some position that he may want, or if he's ready to go. Or if that's what he wants at first, let's come to the table, give me what I want. They don't give him what he wants, whatever that might be, then into Ukraine he goes, because I don't think Vladimir Putin is going to be playing a big bluff. That's just my take on it, and there's a lot of geopolitics behind this. It's all speculation from our standpoint. We are not behind the scenes. We don't know what the end goal is. But as I stated last week or a couple weeks ago, these are some big chess pieces being moved around. You got Turkey somewhat in the midst of all of this as well, because you have various countries. You have the European Union trying to get Turkey to become a member of the EU. You have Russia trying to sell weapon systems to Turkey and to forge a stronger alliance with them, perhaps. And you have China, who's just trying to get involved in everybody's affairs. So they're in the game as well. And then you have the Chinese circling Taiwan, circling the Philippines, building man-made islands in their waters or around their territory so they can island hop. You have tensions in Pakistan over this weekend. You got continuation of tensions in civil wars flaring up in African nations. Of course, you don't hear about a lot of this stuff. You have Iran moving further on their uranium enrichment program. Of course, that gives Israel the jitters, or at least an excuse to play the tough guy and to say, well, we might act unilaterally against the Iranians if they get out of control. We got our affairs here. Craziness at the southern border. This Derek Chauvin trial. Our economy. The hits just keep on coming. And the market sold off today. Jokingly, I say it's because the Federal Reserve is in a blackout period. Because next week they will hold their FOMC meeting. And there's a blackout period. I can't remember how many days before the FOMC meeting occurs, but there's a blackout period where nobody from the Federal Reserve gives speeches or makes statements or anything like that. And of course, they have been going ballistic. Ballistic. One interview after the next, one speech after the next from various members of the Federal Reserve System. And the markets just keep going up, 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 and away. Because mommy and daddy are coming out to say, look, everything's okay. Everything's okay. The market's going to come up. We're going to keep giving you money. We're going to keep giving you crack. So you're going to be happy. Don't worry about it. Then today, blackout periods in effect. They can't come out and say anything. And the markets sell off. Dollar sells off. Commodities up. Although gold and silver didn't have a great day today. but a continuation of the dollar weakening, trading at 90.89 right now at the dollar index, 90.89. Lumber prices continue to go higher, but there's no inflation. One commodity after the next. Interesting times to be alive. I really don't have much else to say. I want to wrap this up, but it's just, it's concerning, to say the least. I can't express how bad I feel and concerned I am for these small businesses that have already been destroyed. The ones that exist might very well end up going under. And what may very well take place coast to coast, regardless of what happens with this Derek Chauvin verdict. It does nothing. It serves no purpose whatsoever. I don't know how you think that that's going to bring people to the table to have a serious conversation with you. It's not going to bring Mr. Floyd back. It's not going to add any years to Derek Chauvin's sentence if he should be found guilty. And it's not going to convict him if he should be found not guilty. It serves no purpose whatsoever. And the fact that we have notable congresswomen out on the streets calling for this type of action and these type of behaviors to take place is criminal. But she's a liberal, she's a she, and she's black. So you can't really say anything about it. What a sad state of affairs. Can't judge this woman off of her content, can't off of her character, off of her statements. Can't do it. She checks too many boxes. And that checks a box as another piece of evidence as to why this country is on a downward spiral. Doesn't have to be. Our best days can very much be ahead of us. I believe that. But not with this type of rhetoric. Not with these types of actions. Not with these types of idiots at the helm. There needs to be a big change. There needs to be revolution. No justice, no peace. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I'm Alex Karitis. Godspeed.